Hello, Scruffy fam. How you doing? Joe here. Man, we are going to go on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from the caliber we've been talking a lot about lately. So we've been really talking about my 10-22 a lot, 22 long rifle. Well, that's my lightest recoiling. We're going to go to my heaviest recoiling. Today, we are going to talk about my 338 Win Mag. Let's do it. So, really the rifle that kicked off this entire thing of me going to gunsmithing school, the firearms, the channel changing a little bit, is my Ruger M77 original Tang Safety and 338 Win Mag. I was talking to my uncle right around hunting season and sharing my frustration that my AR had too short of a barrel for Wisconsin hunting laws and needing to get a new hunting rifle. And I did a lot of research and went and got a Winchester XPR in 308, and I used that as my hunting rifle last year. And wonderful rifle, wonderful rifle. And talking to him, he's like, well, what are you going to do for big game? You know, if you want to go elk hunting or bigger. So take elk size game and bigger. And I'm like, well, I can take the 308. I just have to get close, right? I got to be within 300 yards. I think I can drop an elk with a 308. Good shot placement, good bullet design, heavy enough grain. And he said, yeah, but what about if I've got an extra one? Would you be willing to, think about it? I'm like, what do you mean? Well, he has a 375 H&H, a 338 Win Mag, and a 35 Whalen. He's like, I could take any of those to Alaska, Africa, and I'd be okay. And I agreed with him. I was like, yeah, absolutely. He wanted to keep his 375 and his 35 Whalen. He's like, well, if you want the 338 Win Mag, I'll sell it to you. So after doing some research and thinking about it, I said yes. And so I ended up buying his Ruger M77 original Tang Safety. And it was produced in 1979, so the year after I was born. You do the math, you can figure out how old I am. In the 338. The 338 is a really interesting caliber because it was first marketed, I think it was in the 50s, for Alaska. So right after Alaska became a state, Winchester Model 70 Alaskan came out in 338 Win Mag. And since then, it has become, like, I would say until probably the last 3 years, was the elk round. So if you were going to go hunt elk, 338 Win Mag. I remember that forever. Like, going elk hunting, get a 338 Win Mag. You live in Alaska, get a 338 Win Mag. I think that narrative has changed the last few years. There's such developments in calibers. There's so many different options now that I think that narrative has started to change. But for 50, 60 years, 338 Win Mag was it. One downside to the 338 Win Mag is it took a big hit during COVID. The ammo production for it has really fallen off. It used to be you could get $50-$60 for a box of 338 Win Mag ammo. That is no longer the case. You're looking, I think cheap is $85-$86. Realistic is $100 to $120 for 20 rounds. It is one of those that is significantly cheaper to reload than it is to buy commercially. Now, I was lucky enough to get some commercial ammo and some hand loads that are going to work just fine. I think I still have like 40 rounds of hand loads to go through. So, if I get a hunting situation where I need to go hunting, I am perfectly fine. I've got enough to go hunting and I'll be all right. But what I wanted to show you guys today, let's talk a little bit about my Ruger M77. It is a beautiful rifle, and we'll talk about some of the things that I have done that are a little bit different than the way I got it from my uncle. So first, I'll show you guys the stock that it had on it. This is a Macmillan stock. Macmillan makes like some of the best stocks that are out there. This is one of the old school forest camo ones. My uncle had actually painted the rifle to match this and tried to make it a camo backcountry walking through the Colorado sage hunting for elk. And it was very nice, very nice. It was lightweight. But the problem was that the length of pull was way too short for me. And when I mean way too short, so here's the trigger well right here. Like a good inch and some change short. I'm like, well, I can replace the recoil pad. I can increase the length of pull that way. But just even with the cheek weld and everything, it just is too compact for me. That was dangerously close to getting scoped every time I shot. Luckily, he still had the original maple stock for it, so I ended up putting it back in that. Now, if my uncle sees this, and when he does see the rifle again, he won't be too happy to know that, because Macmillan doesn't make stocks for the M77 anymore. They stopped a while ago, so it's actually kind of a unique piece to have. I will keep it. If anything happens to the maple stock, I can absolutely use that Macmillan one for short term, but I ended up putting it back in the maple stock. So here is my Ruger M77 original Tang Safety, made in 1979. Alright, so let's take a look at this thing. A couple characteristics, if you're not aware what the big deal is about the original Tang Safety. So the original Tang Safety is right back here, okay? That's the safety. So if you've got like a Ruger American, where you can come back here and you just push it up, that's what this is, okay? That's what that is. Instead of having it up on the bolt, like my Model 70 has it up here, where it's a 3-position safety, this is just the original forward for fire, back for safe, okay? The bolt on here, not the smoothest thing in the world, but functions just fine. The weight on this thing's hefty. This thing is very, very heavy. The balance is right where you would want it, which is nice. But this thing is a hefty guy. Let's see what else on here. The length of pull on this was really close. And what it originally came with was this Ruger butt plate. So that's the recoil pad for a 338 Win Mag. Goodyear on the inside. It's rubber. There's nothing. Absolutely nothing. So what I did was I got a Limb Saver recoil pad. So we got this Limb Saver. Super easy to fit up. Screwed right on. Very, very squishy. Very nice. That reduced the recoil quite a bit. The first time I took it to the range and shot it, I was like, oh yeah, that's more than a 30-06. And it wasn't so bad that I had the flinch. Like, I sat there and shot this repeatedly and didn't have the flinch. That recoil pad made all the difference in the world. So big fan of the Limb Saver recoil pads. The next thing I did, though, was as I was shooting it, and Tasha noticed this when we went to the range, the barrel would lift a lot. And that, I mean, it's a 338. It's one of the heaviest recoiling calibers out there. And so what I wanted to do was get a muzzle brake on it. Muzzle brake will reduce recoil by about 50%. I think the Limb Saver says it'll reduce felt recoil by 50 to 70%. A muzzle brake will reduce the recoil, not felt recoil, but reduce the recoil, because it's dissipating the gases out the sides. The other thing it does, it helps keep your barrel down. And that's the other thing that I wanted, is I don't want barrel to lift way up when you're shooting. So been talking to my local gunsmith and was like, hey, I want to get this threaded, muzzle brake, what can we do? And so I just got this back from him, and so we got a muzzle brake on here. This one, that's going to stay on there. We're not taking that off. And if you notice how big the portholes are, this is going to help keep the barrel down when I shoot, which I'm actually really, really excited about. I'll show you guys a couple unique things here. So the original trigger guard on these, right here. So the original trigger guard, let's get the magazine release here. So this part right here, if you try to torque this down to the original specs, it would break this. Like this little piece here would break, and you wouldn't get as good a weld with your magazine and your action. So I ended up getting a steel piece here. So this is all steel. Instead of a composite aluminum, this is steel, which it fit into the stock so much better. So much better. And then one of the little quirky things about this, I'll bring you guys up. I want you guys to look on the inside of the bolt here when I do this. Whoever had this originally inscribed and etched their initials and name on the inside of the receiver. So right here, it's etched into there. It is etched. So I saw that and I went, well, that's interesting. That's not my uncle's initials. So he bought this used, and I thought it just added a little bit of character to here. So that's one of the cool things with some of these older guns is they've got a lot of history to them. So you wonder, you know, how many elk hunts has this been on? How many times has this been out in the woods? How many times has it been shot? The barrel's in really good shape, especially for something this old. The barrel's looking pretty good. The thing you want to be concerned about with the heavier Magnums is barrel burnout, but it's a bigger barrel. It's in good shape. Yeah, so the next step really is I'm going to take this back out to the range. I've got to re-zero it because we had to take the scope off. We put that muzzle brake on. I want to see how this thing shoots with the muzzle brake. But let's take a quick look at the ammo here. So I was able to get this Remington ballistic tip. This is 200 grain with the nozzler ballistic tip, and it is muzzle velocity of 2950 with 3866 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. You're carrying 1641 of foot-pounds of energy at 500 yards with a 42-inch drop. So at 300 yards, you have a 7-inch drop, velocity of 2,300 feet per second, and energy of 2357. That's insane. So you're talking a maximum point blank range out to about 300 yards for this thing. So if you don't know what that means, is you can do a zero where you can hold center and hit an 8-inch circle on game to kill it. So that's pretty nuts. Usually you're within like 200 yards. This you're looking at 300. So let's take a look at the ammo. So this is the 338. This is the factory one. Okay, so about 2950. This is a 200 grain nozzler partition. Also about 2950. So you are carrying a 200 grain projectile just shy of 3,000 feet per second. That's screaming. So guys, really the next thing we're gonna do is we took a look at it, we looked at the ammo. Next video we will take this out to the range and we will put some rounds through it. We'll do some of the Remington and we'll do some of the hand loads and see what we can squeak out. Because this is primarily a hunting rifle, I'm probably just going to take it to 50 yards and get it zeroed at 50 yards, and I'll do my ballistic calculations from there. One, it's 50 yards, it's easier to see, and two, this ammo is ridiculously expensive, so I don't want to be farting around at 100 yards. So we'll take this out, we'll get it resighted in, we'll look at some groups, and this should be fun.